Hello. Today I will be featuring a ship that I have actually been enjoying quite a bit lately. That's the Tier 10 Soviet DD, the Grozovoi. Now, when I first tested the ship, it had almost nothing going for it besides having an absolutely insane anti-air. And that's kind of what made the ship strong in itself, was the ridiculous anti-air. However, Wargaming didn't like just how ridiculous it was, and I do kind of agree with them. It was a bit over the top. So they nerfed the anti-air. The problem was, however, that they didn't take into account that it really was the only thing the Grozovoi had going for it at the time. It had 1.8k base damage on the HE, which was impressive at the time, but then they buffed all other Soviet DDs to 1.9k HE damage, which of course left the Grozovoi in the dust with 1.8k, so it really couldn't compare in any way, and it didn't really have enough gunpowder to do anything. Now a while back they actually buffed the guns on this ship significantly. They reduced the reload from the standard 5 seconds to 4.2, which is a significant buff in DPM, and they increased the range. So now when you slot AFT on the ship, you can actually get a pretty impressive range of 13.2 kilometers on the guns. In comparison, the Kaba has 13.5 with AFT, so you almost match the Khabarovsk. But it does not really play the same way. When people ask me how the Grozovoi plays, my best comparison would be kind of a hybrid between the Kaba and the gearing. The big thing here is, of course, it has a lot of gunpowder, which almost makes it equal to Kaba. Not really quite, but it gets pretty close. The gunpowder on the ship is honestly very impressive. But the issue is really that, first of all, it doesn't have the speed and maneuverability of the Khabarovsk. It does nowhere near the speed, and more importantly, it doesn't have the armor. The Kaba has a pretty impressive 50mm armor plating, protecting it from a lot of the damage it takes. This ship has none of those things. It's as armored as a gearing pretty much, except being a lot bigger than the gearing. And of course the concealment is nowhere near as good. Running the concealment module as I am here, you get concealment down to 7.7. If you run Concealment Expert on top, you can get to 6.9, but I don't like running Concealment Expert, because ultimately what I realized quickly was the strength of the ship was the guns. Ever since the buff, I preferred to use the guns even before the buff, but once they buffed the guns, they have actually made the guns extremely viable on this ship. Now before I move on to that, or the reason why I decided to make this vid now though, is that on PTS, the Grozovoi is actually buffed once more. They are reducing the concealment so that with just the concealment module, you can get the concealment down to 7.2 kilometers, and if you run Concealment Expert, you can get it down to 6.5. Now, even with the changes, I probably still won't run Concealment Expert because it doesn't give it enough concealment. That's really the point. There's kind of a cutoff point for ships around 6.2 kilometers. If you can't reach 6.2 or lower, I don't really think it's worth running Concealment Expert on a high tier DD, because you are at such a disadvantage compared to every other DD, and if something with a 5.8 kilometer concealment runs up to you, like many other DDs, they will outspot you with a 400 meter buffer, and that 400 meters is usually enough to disengage or to keep you spotted infinitely and just really mess up your day. So you can't really contest caps if you can't get the concealment down to that level. So, and of course this Grozovoi, as I said, being lightly armored but still being extremely large, means that it's not very good at contesting caps to begin with, because, well, if you get spotted, it takes you a long time to get away, it takes you a long time to flee, you're a really big ship, and you have no armor to protect yourself, so you take huge damage. And of course, because of the size, you also take massive AP damage. In fact, I've gotten killed by a Grozovoi in 2 volleys from long range, and he did 20k damage to me with those 2 volleys, because the AP does so much damage if he's able to hit even a couple of the shells. So these are obviously weaknesses. Now, of course, this buff though the buff to the concealment doesn't really play the way doesn't change the way I play the game. For example, you saw I pushed the cap, even though I just said this isn't really a cap contester. But the reason, of course, I pushed the cap was because the Yugo was spotting for me, and we could see their DDs being forced away, or well, the DDs got killed pretty much. So we were able to contest this point and capture it. And I mean, why not help them? And of course, here we get to the main point, which is of course the guns. The build I run is entirely focused on the guns. Almost entirely. We have Adrenaline Rush, so that when we get low, we get faster reload. Last Stand, must have on all DDs. Preventive Maintenance, because we don't want to be losing torpedo tubes or guns. And Priority Target, so if people target you, you know to avoid. Because unlike Kaba, who doesn't really need Priority Target, because it doesn't matter if a lot of people target you, as long as, because you got the speed and maneuverability. This one doesn't really have it, so when you get a lot of people targeting you, you kind of want to disengage, stop shooting, and just fade away. So that's why I really like Priority Target, or Target Priority, I can't remember which way, I think it's just Priority Target. But the tier 3 perks are basic firing training. Once again, the ship still has great anti-air. It still has, it's not amazing like it used to be, but it's still great for a DD. And basic firing training, of course, helps your main guns by the 10% reload, but it also increases your anti-air. So it's a pretty straightforward pick. The other one is, of course, Demolition Expert. We spam a lot of HE in this ship, and getting that 2% fire chance increase is very, very valuable. So I run Demolition Expert as well. And as I mentioned, AFT, once again, gun range and anti-air range synergizes really well with each other, and just fits the ship extremely well. And finally, Superintendent instead of running Survivability Expert. Now, the idea here is, of course, not just do you get another defensive AA, meaning you can use it more freely, and you're able to blow through, you can use it even on small stuff like spotter planes, because you have an additional one to spare. But more importantly is that you have 4 smokes when you run the premium smokes. Now this is important because, as I said, the ship isn't tanky enough to really deal with fighting ships in the open, and you want to be dealing a lot of damage, and the best way to do it is from smokes. So instead of trying to play like a Kaba, which uses maneuverability and avoidance and such things to stay alive, you kind of play it like a gearing, in this sense that you'd like to smoke up and shoot your targets from smoke. Because once again, you don't want to be trying to evade those shells, because you don't really have the maneuverability for it. The torps are 10 km, they are not really that special, but they are pretty okay. I didn't bother, I tried some torpedo builds, but it's not worth it. The torps aren't strong enough, whereas the guns are insanely strong, so it's much better to go for a gunner-focused build, like I mentioned. And ultimately, I really like the current state of this ship. I really like this build. Some people have tried concealment builds and such. In fact, FTD, one of my clan members, he ran a concealment build, and then I suggested he try my build, and as far as I know, he's still using my build afterwards, because this type of gunboat build is just superior. So I'm pretty confident in the strength of this build I've been using. And I've been having some really great games in this ship, and I think that a lot of the bad stats this ship has is mostly related to how weak it was before they gave it the gun buff, and the fact that people haven't really figured out how to play this ship, and that's why they have been underperforming. And I think I don't really agree that this concealment buff was needed, but ultimately it won't really change much. People who run the full concealment Grozovoi, they still won't be able to outspot any other DDs, so they'll still get outspotted. 6.5k concealment is nowhere near enough to actively contest caps against stuff like Z52s or Gearings or Shimakazes and stuff like this, so you still won't be able to effectively do it. And people who run the gunboat build that I do, well, they don't change their style much either, except you can get a bit closer and it's easier to disengage. So it's ultimately, the buff isn't that big, but it is worth mentioning that such a buff will be probably arriving, since it's being seen on PTS right now, which means it will probably arrive in the game in the next slightly larger patch. So the Grozovoi itself, well, you've seen my playstyle so far. I helped at sea, I helped support my DDs, I helped kill the enemy DDs, and once that happened, I smoked up and dealt damage. Here, once again, I helped kill an enemy DD. I don't really want to be pushing into the caps. I smoked up with the plan of Daka in this isle over here, but we have no vision of him, so it's getting quite hard. However, I do spot the Grozovoi that is trying to push through our spawn, so I instantly drop torps his way. narrow spread, but as you see, I stack them on top of each other to make it a slightly wider, harder to dodge area. I don't really need much. In this sense, it plays very much like the gearing, in that you don't really need to land many torps. No, you need to land one and get the flooding. That's pretty much all you need. And that's of course my goal on this Grozovoi. I'm not even shooting the Grozovoi because I don't want him to start evading. That's a common mistake you see. People drop torps at some target and then they smoke up and start shooting, and the guy who's being shot, well, the battleship of course reacts. I mean, even the most boneheaded potato will probably react when someone starts shooting him. And that's exactly what's happening here, or could have happened here, but I'm making sure I don't want to shoot him until my torpedoes have arrived. And it looks like he is going to be eating some torps. Looks like only 2, I think. And the second one got me the flooding that I wanted, so now I know who's repaired. Smoke is running out, as we can see by the timer, but in this case I'm only against 1 battleship, so I'm not actually too afraid to take the fight in the open, especially since I have the potential to do so much damage, because I know he's used his repair, and this is where the power of these guns really start showing off. When you run the 3 million upgrade on reload, as I do, and then you run BFT and Demolition Expert, you can reach a pretty impressive 3.3 second reload, and I think the shells have like 11% fire chance. Of course it gets reduced a lot when you're shooting Titan battleships, but with this rate of fire, and of course with the innate HE damage you can deal, you see they are shooting at me, I am actively avoiding to try to mitigate it, and even he managed to hit me. That's the thing though, you can't really play it like a Kaba. Like even here when I'm really just facing this Kurfus close and the other ones are really far away, they are able to hit me quite easily. I already lost a quarter of my HP. That's why you can't really play this ship like a Kaba. It doesn't work that way. It's too large, too clumsy, doesn't have the armor for it. But still, this type of firepower it has is no joke at all. And once again, the upcoming patch won't really change much here. He's shooting, I try to turn in to dodge it. He still landed a couple of hits. You can see once again I'm chunked now to half HP. So this is kind of what I mean. With the Kaba I would probably have a lot easier time of avoiding damage altogether, but that doesn't really work on this ship. But my smoke is up again, so I'm smoking up and continuing firing, especially since I see other ships pushing up. You can see how quickly I melted this guy. I probably dealt like a good 60-70k damage to this dude, if you count in the torps. So pretty damn impressive firepower. And once again, this is why I'm not really certain if I feel like this ship really needed the buff it's getting. But the buff doesn't really change the way I play, and it's not going to change my build, because I really like this build that I have pretty much perfected for the ship, since I was very hyped for this ship when it was full AA, and then I was very disappointed when the AA got nerfed, but the ship didn't get compensated in any way. So we're going from hyped to disappointed to, I think, a pretty good place for this ship now. I think it's a competitive tier 10 now. Mostly though, it still has pretty clear weaknesses. The lack of concealment, it can't really take on gunboats at close range because of size and armor, but it does have the firepower, so like hard choices to make, hard picks to make. But I like the position. It's a bit unique. It plays unique. Like if you don't like the super short range guns on the gearing, like the fairly weak guns, and if you don't want to play full Kaba gunboat, but you kind of want a hybrid between the two, then I feel like this ship is in a pretty nice position, especially with the anti-air, which I'm not really showing off here. Worth noting, I have 130k damage here. On the top right you could see it, and I see the Zhao is fighting in Baltimore. So while of course the Zhao is engaged with the Baltimore, I take this moment to attack him. The Baltimore sadly dies, but I've been able to land a lot of free AP shells on his broadside. As you can see, when a cruiser gives you broadside, just like with any Soviet DD or even US DDs, you should obviously use AP. And I'm able to chunk down his HP significantly. He does finally angle though, so I switch away to HE. His guns have finally turned. This is of course the weakness of the Zhao. It's faster for him to turn his entire ship around than it is to turn his turrets around. So he is finally getting his guns on me, which is of course a huge issue for the Grozovoi, which isn't good at dodging. I do turn in, and I am able to light multiple fires on him. And switching back to AP once he gives broadside, I do finally finish him off. So I did say 130k, so I did what, 26,000 damage, 26k damage to the Tsar right there. So with Adrenaline Rush especially, you can see that my reload is now 2.7 seconds. So having a 2.7 second reload on these guns is no joke. This is of course where the build shines, and this is of course why I also run smokes on this build, so that when you do get low HP, you can still smoke up and you can make use of that insane firepower that you have accumulated for yourself. I have to smoke up here though, because once again, he already hit me with one shell. All he needs is one normal pen or 2 overpens and I'm dead, so I can't risk sailing in the open. I was hoping the Minotaur would be running Hydra here, so he could maybe spot him, but it appears it doesn't, so I'm gonna have to leave the smoke to spot this Yamato for my Minotaur body, because otherwise we are most certainly, or he's going to kill him. Now the Yamato is charging him. I'm hoping the Minotaur would sail, like just drop torps and flee, since he can zone the Yamato out by dropping torps and just running away from him. I do unlock my Wither, which is of course always nice. And yeah, basically this guy just needs to run now, because I can burn this guy down, because his guns are turned the wrong way. It's gonna take him ages to turn to face me. The Minotaur should just be fleeing. I think I got 2 fires on him, 1 or 2 fires, and starting another one. As I said, especially with Adrenaline range at this point, when your reload is down to this 2.7 seconds, you are an insane DPM machine. But sadly the Minotaur decides to, I don't know, go and ram him, and this loses us the game, because I'm left in an impossible situation. I have a Gearing who's capped C and most likely heading towards B, and considering it takes so long to get these points, you get 3 points every 5 seconds, and we only have 1 cap point, so I cannot generate enough points before they will be easily able to cap B. And once they cap B, there's too much time left for me to just run and hide, because they will overtake our points. So really my only hope here is to surprise Torp the Gearing and maybe try to ambush him or be able to kite him away, but the bad situation becomes even worse now, because, well, there's fighter planes left out behind by someone. It could have been the Yamato, honestly. It could have been any one of these ships that have died around here, that have left them around. And this of course ruins my plan, because now the Gearing knows I'm going this way, and I'm popping defensive AA to shoot them down. But yeah, it's not enough. The Iowa is somewhere at C, he might even be pushing into B. And yeah, at this point I'm spotted. I don't even know where the Gearing is, probably from my left. And he has too much HP for me to take this fight. So ultimately the Minotaur dying left me in an unwinnable situation, because as I said, well, not only having to get this close to the Gearing and fighting him is pretty hard in the Grozovoi, because it's you need to turn away and kite to have any chance of beating him. But the fact that he has such a huge spotting advantage means that he will pretty much always get the opener on you. Regardless, this game still allowed me to show off just how much damage potential and just how much sheer power this ship can have. And 191,000 damage. Sadly a defeat though, the Minotaur that did die at the end, with the ramming to the Yamato, he did do a lot of work it seems. So, or was it the other Minotaur? No, it must have been the ramming Minotaur, since he got a kill. So the problem was mostly that I think we had an Yamato that DC'd, and then we had, in the beginning we had an AFK Fletcher who then ran to A and instantly died, so that made it a very, very hard game for us. But still, even with these downsides, it was very close, and the ship really did have a chance to shine. Moving on, of course, to the detailed report, you can see just how many shells I've been landing, like HE shells, 344 shells. 85k damage just with the shells. The torps, as I said, they're not really a big deal. I mean, the torps are pretty good, but they're still 10 km, and mostly you want to use them to start that flood. You start the flood, they repair, you open up with HE. That's very much the Gearing type of gameplay that we're going for here. And I think it's a very strong ship. I really like the build that I use, and the upcoming patch, which will increase its concealment, will make it even better. So honestly, I think the Grozovoi is in a really good spot right now, and I hope they don't do the mistake they made with the Kaba, which is they overbuff it. I felt like buffing the HE damage on the Kaba was very stupid, and it was obvious it was going to get nerfed, and of course that is why we now see that they are fiddling with the rudder shift on the Kaba and looking for ways to tone it down, because obviously it's overperforming everywhere. Anyway, I'll just show off my build real quick, since I assume a lot of people will probably want to see it. Right, starting off, the torpedo upgrade, the stupid one that you actually have to get. It's not even an option, it's a straight up upgrade, so you have to get it, which is stupid. Premium smoke, priority 1, following by repair and AA. Upgrade wise, main armaments mod 1, AA guns mod 2, we run AFT, so of course we want more range. And then we have main battery mod 3, once again we're making a gun focused build. Propulsion mod 1, and steering gears, and followed by concealment expert. Or no, what is it called? Concealment module? Whatever. Preventive maintenance, your first pick. Last stand. Once you have last stand, I would follow it up with demolition expert. Then you get AFT. Once you have AFT, you can go for superintendent, followed by probably adrenaline rush, and then basic firing training, and finally priority target. That would be my order of priority in picking these skills. Ultimately though, the build of course synergizes the best when you have the full build, because then you get all the gun bonuses and all the AA bonuses, which makes it a very strong destroyer in my opinion. I don't feel it's overpowered because, well, it has still so many weaknesses, and it still gets wrecked in close quarters quite easily, and it takes more damage than really any other DD when fighting cruisers and battleships in the open. But it has a lot of firepower to compensate, so honestly I feel like Wargaming have nailed this ship quite well at this point. Anyway, that was all from me. I hope you guys enjoyed it.